9,000 roses covered the lawn, 300 drones formed a heart in the sky, and countless diamonds were embedded in a wall of confessions, creating an extremely luxurious confession ceremony. LED screens throughout the city broadcast the event live. Everyone knew my name, Luna Evans. They also knew that at that grand ceremony, I accepted the confession of the heir to the Cole Group, and from then on, I was spoken for. The confession ceremony was too extravagant. Overnight, I became the talk of the town. The buzz refused to die down. Even 5 days after the proposal, the top 3 trending topics in the city's chat app were still about that proposal. Clicking on one of the topics, real-time comments were refreshing rapidly. I skimmed through them briefly. Most of the comments were wild screams, with some wishing me happiness and saying I must have saved the galaxy in a previous life to deserve such a rich and ruthless boyfriend. Others were trying to dig up information about me. But aside from my name, there was nothing else online related to me. The screen was filled with neatly arranged screaming emojis. It was blinding. So when that comment appeared, it stood out immediately. The user ID was Happy Bear. Under the post, they commented, "Making such a big deal out of a confession ceremony is easy to catch the attention of the sculptor. I wonder if this woman named Luna Evans is afraid for her life." The comment seemed like a well-meaning warning, but it also carried a hint of threat. In any case, I immediately zeroed in on that comment. Mentioning the sculptor, people quickly started leaving comments in the comment section. Oh my God. How could I forget about this? The sculptor, huh? He's been on the run for 3 whole months, with no trace of him anywhere. He strikes on the 7th of every month, and now it's the 4th month, with just 1 week left. I wonder who the unlucky 4th victim will be. A citywide live confession? That's so bold. If I were the killer, I'd probably target Luna Evans too. Agreed, I think that's highly likely. The comments section was buzzing with discussions about the sculptor. Everyone was speculating that I might be the next victim. 3 months ago, a murder occurred in Seattle. The victim was a lone woman living alone. Her breasts were severed, her shin bones were shattered inch by inch, her clothes were torn to shreds, and nearly half of her clothing was missing. The entire room was covered in blood. When she was discovered, she had already ceased breathing. It was clearly a homicide. However, there were no clues at the scene. Even after the entire neighborhood was sealed off, surveillance footage was reviewed frame by frame, and all suspects were investigated, the killer remained at large. Although the incident caused a huge stir at the time, it only garnered attention for a few days. As time passed, people's attention was gradually diverted by various gossip. Even though the murderer had not been found, few people continued to pay attention to the case. However, a month later, another young woman was found brutally murdered in her home. The method of death was identical, with no clues left behind. All suspects were investigated and had alibis. The case had reached a dead end. It wasn't until the 3rd month, on the 7th. Despite the police's prior preparations, the sculptor managed to sneak into a high-end residential area undetected and murder a lone woman. For 3 consecutive months, on the 7th, he brutally murdered innocent girls using the same method. The case reached its peak, with nearly the entire city discussing the sculptor and fearing they might become the next victim. As a result, netizens began scouring for clues. They sought to find connections between the victims to assist the police in solving the case and restoring peace to Seattle. After intense discussions, the netizens identified at least one common thread. All 3 girls had started dating someone within the same month. However, none of them lived with their boyfriends and were all living alone. The authorities did not issue any official statements, and these were all just speculations from the netizens. Now, netizens believe I will be the next victim. After all, the confession ceremony was too grand, with almost the entire city watching the live stream. I accepted the confession, and it has been less than a month since last month's 7th, and my boyfriend is currently out of town on a business trip. I perfectly fit the netizen speculation of the victim's profile. I am now the easiest target for the sculptor. My private messages are flooded. Netizens are sending me private messages, urging me to stay indoors as much as possible and avoid talking to strangers. If I'm targeted by the sculptor, there's almost no chance of survival. Breast cutting, bone crushing. It's the act of a completely inhumane psychopath. I sighed inwardly, just as I was about to check the messages again, the apartment doorbell rang. I put down my phone, stood up, and walked to the door, peering through the peephole. Two men stood side by side at my front door, identical in appearance. I quickly recognized them as the new neighbors who had just moved in across the hall today. This building only has 2 apartments per floor. Before I moved in, the previous residents of the apartment across the hall had listed the place online because they were immigrating abroad, and it had been vacant for several months. I hadn't met the previous residents either. As for how I knew these twin brothers were the new neighbors who had just moved in today, it was because I heard some noise in the hallway, peeked through the peephole several times, and saw 2 people who looked exactly alike dragging suitcases into the apartment across the hall. Twins, and good-looking ones at that, they always leave a strong impression. Not murderers. I exhaled in relief and opened the door. "Hello, miss." One of the boys immediately waved at me. He smiled, revealing a mouthful of white teeth, and his face was extremely handsome, the very embodiment of a sunny, cheerful young man. The other one looked more refined. He adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses, the corners of his mouth curving into a faint smile, and nodded politely at me before handing me the black bag he was holding. "Hello, I'm Ethan Shaw. He's my twin brother, Evan Shaw. We just moved here, and will need your help in the future. This is a gift from me and Evan for you." Ethan Shaw was clearly a well-mannered gentleman, speaking slowly and deliberately. I was about to refuse. But Ethan Shaw didn't give me a chance. After saying that, he turned around and walked back to the apartment across the street with Evan Shaw. He moved so quickly that by the time I reacted, the door across the street had already closed completely. There was nothing I could do, so I took the gift home. But I didn't open it right away. Instead, I placed the box on the coffee table in the living room. Then I continued to curl up on the sofa and scroll through my phone. By noon, I ordered takeout on my phone. I stayed home all afternoon. It wasn't until late at night that my gaze was once again drawn to the black bag. After hesitating for a few seconds, I decided to open the gift. Inside was a set of skincare products and a women's watch. At first glance, these items were clearly expensive. I checked the prices on the official website, and the skincare set alone cost several $1,000s, let alone the women's watch, which looked exquisitely crafted. Was it really necessary to give such an expensive gift as a housewarming present to a neighbor? With doubts swirling in my mind, I took a photo of the items with my phone and told Xiao Zhe, who was on a business trip out of town, about the twin brothers who had moved in across the hall. But at this hour, he was most likely already asleep. So I put down my phone and continued to fiddle with the women's watch. The craftsmanship was indeed excellent and very much to my taste. However, looking at the watch, I suddenly realized something. Due to special circumstances, I was temporarily unable to use my ID card. Therefore, the rental contract was under my boyfriend Jason Cole's name, and I had moved in the middle of the night just a week ago. Even if I went to the property management office to inquire, they would only know that the resident of Unit 9502 is a man. And during this time, I hadn't gone out at all and hadn't seen anyone. Even when ordering takeout, I had the delivery person bring it to the door and waited until they left before going out to retrieve it. But both the watch in my hand and the skincare set had a strong, unmistakable meaning. So, how did they determine that I'm a woman? My heart skipped a beat, and I began to have some unpleasant suspicions. At the same time, the door was knocked again. The sudden knocking sounded especially terrifying in the quiet of the night. Especially since I had just begun to have some unpleasant suspicions. Who was outside the door? It couldn't be Xiao Zhe. He was still abroad. We had just spoken on the phone at 6 in the afternoon. He said he had an important meeting tomorrow and wouldn't be able to return until the 10th at the latest. But in this city, I didn't know anyone else besides him. So who was knocking on the door? I took a deep breath, kicked off my shoes, and walked barefoot to the door. I lifted the small cover over the peephole and cautiously approached. Ah! The empty corridor suddenly filled with a figure dressed in black, wearing a mask that covered most of their face. As I looked through the peephole, they suddenly lunged forward. I screamed in terror and fell to the ground. The knocking sounded again urgently. I pressed my back against the door and held it tightly. My phone had also fallen to the ground in the commotion, breaking a corner. When I picked it up, it was already black and wouldn't turn on. Dong dong dong. The knocking continued, and I just sat there, feeling the door panel shake with each blow, as if someone was trying to break through it. I don't know how long it took, but the knocking suddenly stopped. Immediately afterward, there was a commotion. I quickly stood up and peered through the peephole. I saw the front door of the apartment across the hall wide open. Evan Shaw, wearing his pajamas, was grabbing the mysterious man by the collar and punching him hard in the face. The two of them were wrestling on the ground. The commotion was too loud, and the mysterious man didn't pursue further. He seized the opportunity to shove Evan Shaw hard and ran toward the stairs. Evan Shaw had intended to chase after him, but after taking a few steps, he suddenly clutched his leg and grimaced in pain. I quickly opened the door and ran out barefoot. "Evan Shaw, are you okay?" Evan Shaw clutched his thigh, which was still bleeding profusely. He turned to look at me and shook his head slightly. "That guy played dirty." He pulled out a knife and slashed at my leg. But I dodged quickly. "It's just a superficial cut." Despite his words, his pants were stained with blood. It looked quite gruesome. I quickly helped him back to the apartment across the street. Evan Shaw sat on the sofa, wincing in pain. "The second drawer under the TV has a first aid kit. Could you please get it for me?" "Thanks." I nodded and hurried over to get the first aid kit. However, when I opened the large drawer, I found not only the first aid kit but also several gifts identical to the ones I had received today, piled up beside it. Evan Shaw must have noticed my gaze. "Sorry about that. My brother may look polite, but he's not very emotionally intelligent. So I prepared these gifts for him to use for social occasions." "Are all the items inside the same?" I asked the question that was on my mind. Evan Shaw nodded. "Yes, they're all the same." "But how do you know whether the recipient is male or female?" "You prepared lotion and a lady's watch. What if the recipient is a man?" Evan Shaw shrugged it off. "Gifts are all about being valuable. Even if the recipient is a man, these items can be given to his mother, wife, or daughter, or even as a favor to someone else. They don't necessarily have to be used by the recipient himself." So that's how it was. I secretly sighed in relief, as the news about the murderer had made me suspicious earlier. But now that he explained it so calmly, I realized I had overthought it. I didn't dwell on the issue further and quickly took out the first aid kit, using the knowledge I had learned before to treat his leg wound. Evan Shaw looked serious. "But speaking of which, have you offended anyone?" I shook my head. "I just moved into this neighborhood. I haven't even left the house in days, and I haven't even seen the delivery guy. There's no way I could have made an enemy. There was someone who wanted me dead before. But he's dead now. So there's no one out to get me. It's definitely not revenge." Evan Shaw looked pensive. "You live here alone?" "Yes. My boyfriend was here too, but he's been abroad on a business trip and won't be back until the 10th. As the heir to the Chi family, Jason Cole was the most outstanding member of the younger generation, so he had an especially heavy workload, spending 5 or 6 months abroad on business trips each year." Evan Shaw hummed in acknowledgement, realizing something belatedly. "But how did you know I'm your brother and not your older brother Ethan Shaw?" I had just finished treating his wound and sighed in relief. "You two look exactly alike, but one is refined and the other is sunny. Just the way you look at things is different, so it's easy to tell." Evan Shaw smiled. He scratched the back of his head, as if in casual conversation, and said that he knew I was Luna Evans the moment he saw me. After all, the citywide LED screen live confession had been quite a sensation. It would have been harder not to know. He pointed to the room on the left, which was open but dark. "Speaking of my brother, he's still working overtime at the hospital and hasn't come back yet. If I hadn't left the door open for him, I would have been playing games on the couch and wouldn't have heard the noise outside." As soon as he finished speaking, the door was knocked. "My brother is back." Evan Shaw leaned on the sofa to stand up, but I pushed him back. After all, he was injured because of me, so opening the door for him was the least I could do. When the door opened, Ethan Shaw stood there in black. He saw that it was me who opened the door. Ethan Shaw raised his eyebrows slightly but didn't seem too surprised. He nodded at me briefly before walking straight into the apartment. "Are you hurt?" Ethan Shaw glanced at Evan Shaw sitting on the sofa. There was a blood-stained bandage on the coffee table, and his leg was tightly wrapped in bandages. Evan nodded. Some crazy person suddenly showed up out of nowhere, kept banging on Luna's door. I rushed out to confront him, but he raised his hand to hit me. I beat him up, but that bastard used a knife to try to stab me. Luckily, I dodged in time, but my leg was cut open a bit. Since he was injured because of me, no matter how serious it is, I am also responsible for this incident. You should still go to the hospital and get it checked out. It's a cut, so you should get a tetanus shot. I'll pay for it later, okay? Evan Shaw waved his hand dismissively. It's nothing. No need to go to the hospital. Ethan Shaw turned his gaze back to me. It's fine. He's tough. Evan Shaw immediately tapped the sofa in displeasure. Ethan Shaw didn't say much either, just pointed to his room. I worked overtime today doing 2 surgeries and I'm a bit tired. Since you're fine, I'll leave you to it. I'm going to take a shower and rest. It was already 11 p.m. Hearing Ethan Shaw say that, I also hurriedly said I wanted to go home. After all, staying here late at night did feel a bit inappropriate. However, I ran too quickly and tripped over the doorframe as I was leaving. I almost fell. Ethan Shaw acted quickly and caught me. He was very gentlemanly, only holding my wrist, keeping a proper distance to avoid seeming too forward. Thank you. I thanked him politely and hurried back to my own home. But as soon as I entered my bedroom, I sensed something was off. The window, which should have been tightly closed, was now ajar, letting in a cool breeze. Not only that. There was a vibrant rose on my bed, as if it had just been picked from a garden. Who put it there? My heart was racing. Just as I reached out to pick up the rose, I suddenly noticed a bloodstain on my sleeve. Before applying medicine to Evan Shaw, I had deliberately rolled up my sleeve. It wasn't until after I finished applying the medicine and washed my hands that I pulled my sleeve down. At the time, I had checked carefully to make sure there was no blood on me. The only person who had touched my sleeve was Ethan Shaw. Ethan Shaw? The mysterious man? Ever since Ethan Shaw returned, his hands had been in his pockets the entire time. Until I almost tripped while leaving, he was standing beside me and quickly reached out to steady me. In that brief moment, his hand had touched my sleeve. Could it have been then? If so, why would he have blood on him? Even if he was performing surgery at the hospital, he would have washed his hands before returning. He is a doctor after all, he wouldn't forget something like that. If he had blood on him and it wasn't from surgery, then what could it be? Unless, he is the mysterious man. Or perhaps he is more than just mysterious. Could it be the sculptor? I don't know if my guess is correct. But when the mysterious person appeared, Ethan Shaw was working overtime. And after I went to the apartment across the street, someone entered my home during that time and left a rose on the bed. Ethan Shaw didn't return until just before I was about to go back. He definitely had enough time to do all of this. Once the seeds of doubt were planted, I couldn't sit still. I just sat down on the bed, reached out to pick up the roses, and suddenly my phone, which had been black, rang. It was Joe Zha calling. I answered. He asked, "Do you think there's something wrong with those twins?" Joe Zha went straight to the point. I hummed in response, then asked, "Has the matter of my identity been handled?" Living too long isn't necessarily a good thing. Every few decades, you have to find a way to update your identity. Otherwise, you'll keep the same face for decades, and by the time you're in your 70s or 80s, you'll still look 18. While I find that amusing, if others discover it, they might send you off for research. Xiao Zhe was busy with something on his end. After half a minute, he replied, "Don't worry, it's all taken care of. Once I return to the country on the 10th, I'll personally hand over the identity documents to you. After that, you won't have to worry about anyone checking your identity. You'll still be the 18-year-old Luna Evans." Ugh. Still a bit annoyed. If it weren't for the unresolved identity issue, someone sneaking into my house and leaving a rose on my bed would be enough for me to call the police. But once I report it, the police will definitely ask about my identity. Better the devil you know than the devil you don't. Finding this mysterious person is something I'll have to handle on my own. After hanging up with Xiao Zhe, I called another person. "What's up?" The female voice on the other end was cold and businesslike. But after all these years, I'd gotten used to it and didn't think much of it. I looked at my right hand. This hand had touched Evan Shaw, and later, after accidentally falling, it had also touched Ethan Shaw. With identical twin genes, does our ability become ineffective? I couldn't tell the difference between good and evil. I couldn't tell right from wrong. There was a moment of silence on the other end before she hummed in response. With identical genes, we can't tell twins apart. Remember to be careful and make sure you can tell them apart. Otherwise, if you hurt an innocent person, you'll have to pay with your life. I nodded obediently. Okay, Aunt Clara. The next day, I slept until the afternoon. When I woke up, it was almost dusk. To add a sense of ritual to my life, I had bought a cute calendar at home. Every morning, I tore off a page, and eventually it would form a cute shape. Tearing off yesterday's page, I saw the number 4. Today was August 4th. I suddenly thought of the serial killer again. It was said that every 7th of the month was the day he struck. Only 2 days left. I ordered some takeout and continued to curl up on the sofa and browse the forum. The heat of the confessions had gradually faded, and more people were still discussing the serial killer. Some people were even voting on whether I would become the killer's next target. I thought about it and voted no. After all, no one wants to curse themselves to death. Half an hour later, there was a knock on the door. My phone also rang with a call from the delivery guy. As usual, I texted him to leave it at the door. After a few minutes with no movement, I opened the door to get it. As soon as I opened the door, I saw Evan Shaw coming out to get his delivery too. But as he lifted his takeout, the soup spilled all over the floor. He had a leg injury and was limping, so he hurried back inside to get a mop. Seeing this, I put down my own takeout and took the mop from him. This leg injury was my fault. It was just a superficial wound, but there was a cut that had bled. He was limping, so helping him out was the least I could do to repay him. Evan Shaw hurriedly thanked me, then looked at the soup on the floor with regret. I was starving. I finally waited for the takeout to arrive, but it all spilled. I was about to offer him my takeout. But then I remembered he had an injury on his leg and shouldn't eat spicy food these days, so my spicy water-boiled fish wouldn't be suitable for him. Evan Shaw, do you have any noodles at home? If you're really hungry, I can cook you a bowl of noodles. After all, he saved my life. Cooking him a bowl of noodles is no trouble at all. Evan Shaw smiled shyly, seeming to want to refuse. But before he could speak, his stomach growled loudly. He covered his stomach awkwardly. Then I'll trouble you. I went to the apartment across the street. Evan Shaw told me that his brother had gone to work at the hospital early in the morning. Plus, he had to work overtime tonight, so he wouldn't be back until around 11 or 12 p.m. Hearing this, I breathed a sigh of relief. The guess I made last night was still a mystery in my heart. Unable to meet, unable to see. The fear in my heart eased slightly. I served Evan Shaw a bowl of noodles, sprinkled some green onions on top, and added some vegetables. It looked quite light. But this was the only thing I had known how to cook in my entire life. So, it tasted pretty good. Evan Shaw took a bite and immediately gave me a thumbs up, his eyes sparkling with admiration. It's really delicious. Watching him eat the noodles, I took out my own takeout and sat down on the sofa with him, eating dinner by the coffee table. The TV was on, airing the news. Perhaps because the 7th was approaching, the news once again mentioned the serial killer. It reminded residents to avoid walking alone at night, avoid contact with strangers, and stay home as much as possible. In short, don't go out alone if you can help it. I've seen some comments online. Many people are speculating that the killer's next target is you. Evan Shaw watched the news and suddenly spoke up, hesitating at the end. I hummed in response. I saw those comments online too. But my luck shouldn't be that bad. There are so many people in this city, how could I be the unlucky one? People have to believe in their own luck, right? Out of millions of people, they'd pick one. I shouldn't have that kind of bad luck. Evan Shaw also laughed, as if joking, but that's not necessarily the case. You know, your boyfriend threw such a grand proposal ceremony that almost everyone in Seattle knew about it. The serial killer must have seen it too, and with the online speculation, you're the perfect fit. It does fit. I turned my head to look at Evan Shaw. A murderer would target a single woman living alone. But now that we're so close, living next door, if anything happens to me, you'll definitely come to save me first, right? It was just a joke. Evan Shaw nodded with a smile. Of course. If anything happens, I'll definitely grab a kitchen knife and rush out first. Friendship is built in an instant. Not to mention that he had saved me before, so our relationship quickly progressed from polite to very familiar, even to the point where we could chat like old friends. Evan Shaw also gave me a tour of his apartment, which had a different layout from mine. There were 2 bedrooms and a storage room, with the innermost bedroom locked. Evan Shaw said his brother kept many important documents in there, and even he couldn't open the study. As for Evan Shaw's room, it was quite cluttered. There was a sports jersey hanging on the bedhead, surrounded by posters of athletes I didn't recognize, and the opposite wall was filled with survival gear. In the corner, there were climbing ropes, dumbbells, and other items. It was clear that Evan Shaw was also an adventurous and athletic person. I picked up the climbing rope, held it in my hand, and then turned to look at the closed room across the hall. Does your brother also like these things? Evan Shaw shrugged. He likes them too, but he often works overtime and rarely has time to go out and play. After saying that, he opened the door to Ethan Shaw's room across the hall. Want to take a look? I hesitated. That doesn't seem right. He smiled, opened the door, and walked in casually. It's fine. I clean and mop his room every day. There's nothing secret in here. I didn't refuse anymore and followed him into Ethan Shaw's room. Surprisingly clean, every item was neatly arranged. In the corner, there was a box containing rock climbing ropes and other items. I walked around his room and then went to the balcony. Standing on the balcony, I looked down and had a good view of the entrance to the residential area. Knock knock. The apartment door was knocked on, and Ethan Shaw's phone also rang. I just ordered some small cakes. It's a way of thanking you for your kindness earlier. I was about to go out to get it for him, but he was quick and pushed me back. This is no trouble for me. You're a guest. Just feel free to look around. After saying that, he turned and left Ethan Shaw's room. I didn't linger any longer and was about to go out when I passed by the bed and accidentally kicked the exposed box. Looking down, I saw a corner of the box. I couldn't make out what was inside. I was about to kick it back in, but then I remembered the bloodstains on the sleeve of the shirt from yesterday. Curiosity got the better of me, and I knelt down and pulled the box out. The box wasn't heavy. I easily lifted it up, and it was covered with a white cloth. I pulled back the cloth, and what greeted my eyes were some blood-stained pieces of fabric. One was pure white, another had stars printed on it, and the third was blue with floral patterns embroidered on it. But without exception, every piece of fabric bore bloodstains of varying degrees of freshness. Blood, missing clothes. My heart was pounding, and I was completely panicked. I hurriedly stuffed the clothes back into the box, pushed it under the bed, and turned to flee, but instead, I collided with a sturdy embrace. Miss Lynn, where are you going? I looked up to see Ethan Shaw, dressed in his work uniform, smiling at me with a steady gaze. I had no idea when he had appeared. I hadn't heard any footsteps at all. It was as if he had materialized out of thin air behind me. I didn't know how much he had seen, or if he had noticed me taking out the box. I looked at him, unable to speak for a moment. Ethan Shaw smiled at me, and his smile made me feel uneasy. I didn't know how much time had passed. Evan Shaw limped over, peeking his head out. The cake is cut. Come out and eat. Ethan Shaw nodded and stepped aside. Seeing this, I hurried out. The cake on the coffee table had been cut into small pieces. Evan Shaw handed me one, smiling broadly. When I opened the door, I saw my brother had come back too. He came back to get something and suddenly stood behind you. Did he scare you? I shook my head. I took the piece of cake, ate a couple of bites casually, then made an excuse and quickly left to go home. But just before I left, I turned around and looked at Ethan Shaw. He was standing at his bedroom door, pushing his glasses up, and gave me a polite smile. Miss Lynn, do you need any help? Click. The moment he spoke, I quickly closed his front door. Then I pulled out the key, opened the door to my home, and confirmed that the room was locked from the inside before collapsing onto the sofa with a sigh of relief. After taking a moment to calm down, I took out my computer from the room and searched for information about the 3 victims. Especially the clothes they were wearing. Could the missing clothes be the ones from Ethan Shaw's room? However, the information available online was extremely limited, and most of it was inaccessible. Fortunately, when the second victim was discovered, a group of friends had come to her house. Some were too scared to move, but others took photos and videos. Although the videos were blurred, I could faintly see the victim's blood-stained clothes. It was a dress with stars printed on it. I clearly remember that among the 3 pieces of fabric I found in Ethan Shaw's room earlier, one of them had stars printed on it. Exactly the same. So, is Ethan Shaw really the infamous the sculptor? I quickly pulled out my phone from my pocket. I was so nervous that my hands were shaking, causing the phone to slip out of my grasp and fall onto the carpet. I quickly bent down to pick it up, then knelt on the ground and opened the phone. Just as I pressed 10. Before I could press the last digit, I suddenly felt a chill breeze behind me. Out of reflex, I turned around and looked up. Ethan Shaw, wearing a white lab coat, smiled at me, then suddenly extended his right hand and sprinkled something in front of me. Some white powdery particles scattered in the air. I didn't have time to react, and I lost consciousness in an instant. When I came to, I found myself tied to a chair, completely unable to move. Looking around, it seemed like an abandoned factory. Through the window not far away, I could see lush, green trees swaying in the wind, most likely on a mountain. Awake? A smooth, seductive voice echoed behind me. Ethan Shaw was still wearing his white lab coat, holding a rose in his left hand and a scalpel in his right. He walked slowly toward me. In front of me, he kissed the vibrant rose. Then he placed the rose on my leg and used the scalpel to trace a line across my chest. Luna Evans, do you know what a bone-scraping knife is? His smile looked sickly, especially when he wore glasses and glanced up at me with a sinister, mocking expression in his eyes, making my scalp tingle. Bone-scraping knife. From a poem, The Song of Wine, Women, and Wealth. Wine is a poison that pierces the intestines, women are a steel knife that scrapes the bones. Wealth is a fierce tiger descending the mountain, arrogance is the root of trouble. It seems 4 words are harmful, better to erase them all. Without wine, there is no etiquette, without beauty, the path is desolate. Without talent, the world is hard to navigate, without arrogance, one is easily bullied. It seems 4 words are useful, I urge you to tailor them to your needs. And the bone-scraping knife refers to beauty. Color is a steel knife that scrapes the bone, means that beauty is extremely dangerous, as it can lead one to become obsessed and unable to escape, ultimately causing one's will to collapse and bringing unimaginable harm. So, I looked up at Ethan Shaw. Have you been deceived by beauty, or have you been deceived in love? So now, you plan to take revenge on society? Ethan Shaw listened to my words and suddenly burst into laughter, his smile filled with contempt. How could I possibly like those stupid women? Lust is a bone-scraping knife, even a slight touch would leave you dead or peeling. He seemed to harbor deep hatred toward women. Since you weren't deceived by money or lust, why target those young girls? They were all in the prime of their lives. Cutting off breasts, crushing legs. Extremely brutal methods of murder, even 1,000 executions wouldn't be enough. Ethan Shaw suddenly flew into a rage, clutching my chin tightly with his left hand and glaring at me with hatred. I'm saving society. Those women start dating at such a young age, who knows if they'll cheat on their boyfriends in the future. Cutting off their breasts and shattering their legs ensures they can't seduce others anymore. I'm doing this to save them. I spat in his face and glared back at him just as fiercely. So there's no such thing as being hurt. It's just assuming you're doing something good for others. You think lust is a sharp knife that can cut to the bone, so you've decided that once women fall in love, they'll inevitably harm those around them, especially their boyfriends. Then, under the guise of saving society and everyone, he killed them with his own hands. Ethan Shaw, you're a madman. Ethan Shaw didn't kill me immediately. The 7th day hadn't arrived yet. He had his own damn ritual. If I hadn't discovered those blood-stained fabrics, he might not have acted so soon. But since I had, he knew I would definitely call the police. So he decided to act first. He tied me up and kept me there until the 7th day. Then, once the time came, he would use the same methods he used on those girls on me. And then he'd feel like he'd saved society again. He's completely mad. No wonder his heart is as black as ink. But even though he didn't kill me, he didn't leave me any food, not even a drop of water. Every evening, he would come to the abandoned factory under the moonlight, walk around me, as if admiring a piece of art, and secretly tear off the calendar I had bought for myself. The 5th, the 6th, the 7th. I was already extremely weak, but my limbs were bound. There was nothing I could do but watch the seventh arrive and the sky grow darker and darker. As the moonlight descended, the gates of the abandoned factory were opened once more. I couldn't help but close my eyes. Today, you've come to kill me, haven't you? The other person didn't speak. They simply walked toward me step by step, but their footsteps sounded slightly different from usual. I couldn't help but open my eyes. In the brief exchange of glances, I could confirm that the person before me was Evan Shaw. Evan Shaw? Seeing that I recognized him, he gave me a faint smile. Then he reached out and began to untie the ropes binding me. How did you know I was here? I looked at Evan Shaw, who was kneeling on the ground untangling the ropes, and finally couldn't help but ask. He raised his eyes, a hint of apology in his gaze. I'm sorry. I didn't know my brother would do such a thing. I've been following the online rumors all along. I was worried you might become the next victim. When I noticed you hadn't been home for days and there was no sign of you, I couldn't help but knock on the door. I found your phone still lying on the carpet and realized something was wrong. I was about to call the police when I saw your laptop, which had only 1% battery left. When I turned it on, the screen showed a photo of the second victim. At this point, Evan Shaw suddenly lowered his head. That shirt. I saw it in my brother's room too. After saying that, his eyes welled up with tears, and he tightly gripped my hand, his eyes betraying his uncontrollable sadness. I had already discovered that box before, but my brother told me that the clothes inside were from his first surgery, the clothes the patient had changed into, and they were a memento of his first successful surgery, so he wanted to keep them as a keepsake. But I never imagined they would be the victim's clothes. Evan Shaw's voice grew increasingly choked with emotion. After realizing it was my brother, I waited until he wasn't home and secretly picked the lock to his study. Then I found a map in the desk drawer, marked with this location, so I rushed over here. After hearing the entire story, I didn't know what to say. Evan Shaw had no idea either. Otherwise, he wouldn't have rushed over to save me. He wiped away a tear, then quickly lowered his head to continue untangling the ropes. He then grabbed my hand and rushed out. Today is the 7th. My brother said he had to work overtime. There's a good chance he's coming here. I don't know when he'll arrive, so we have to leave immediately. I nodded, looking at him with gratitude. I couldn't help but hug him. Evan Shaw, I'm truly grateful to you. If it weren't for him, I might not have survived. Evan Shaw's body stiffened slightly. He patted my back and let go of me. You have a boyfriend now. It's not appropriate for us to hug like this. Though. I like you. The sudden confession caught me off guard. Looking at his ears, which were bright red, I couldn't help but laugh, then reached out and hugged him again. This time, I held him tightly. Although Xiao Zhe said he likes me, he's always on business trips and doesn't have time to spend with me. We're not even considered boyfriend and girlfriend. But you saved my life this time. If it's okay with you, I want to be with you forever. Is that okay? Evan Shaw suddenly held me tightly. Due to our position, I couldn't see the expression on his face. I only heard him ask, Luna Evans, are you really sure you want to be with me? I nodded without hesitation. He let go of me, his expression serious. All right, then we're together. I smiled. Then I let him take my hand and we ran out together. We didn't know when Ethan Shaw would arrive, so leaving this dangerous place was the most important thing. I had never been to this mountain before. But as we ran, the mountain path became increasingly difficult to navigate. I nearly fell several times, but Evan Shaw caught me each time. The mountain was quite high, and we eventually reached a steep slope. We had planned to rest for a moment, but Evan Shaw pulled out a cup of water from his bag and handed it to me. As I reached out to take it, I noticed a knife tucked at his waist. Evan Shaw, why did you bring a knife? I said this in a calm voice. His smile froze for a moment, then he pulled the knife from his waist. It was also a surgical knife. I took this from my older brother. I brought it in case we encountered any trouble. It can protect us, and more importantly, it can save you. So that's why. I exhaled in relief, then slowly walked up to him and hugged him again. This place was far too steep. The slightest misstep could send you tumbling down, never to be found. I glanced down and felt a surge of fear. Evan Shaw, you have to protect me on the way down. This place is way too steep. I'm afraid of heights. He let go of me and nodded. But he didn't start walking immediately. Instead, he asked me with utmost seriousness, "Luna, are you really sure you want to be with me forever?" "Yes, I want to be with you forever. Until the moment you die." I said it just as seriously. Evan Shaw smiled. But the next moment, his expression turned fierce. He raised the scalpel in his hand and lunged toward my chest. Out of reflex, I blocked it. My arm was cut, leaving a bloody gash that made me break out in a cold sweat. Evan Shaw didn't hesitate, raising the knife and continuing to stab toward me. I knew it. There's not a single good woman in this world. Lust is a steel blade that cuts to the bone. Did you really think you could seduce me? He roared, aiming the blade at my heart. I grabbed his wrist, preventing him from stabbing me immediately. Evan Shaw, do you really want to kill me? Tears welled up in my eyes as I stared at him intently. We promised to be together forever. Unless you die, I don't want to be separated from you. I love you so much. Are you really going to kill me? Evan Shaw laughed even more wildly. There's not a single good woman in the world. I'll kill them all. If that's the case. I chose to let go. All right, I'll grant you your wish. The knife pierced my heart. Due to the steep terrain, my body rolled uncontrollably down the hillside behind me. There were all sorts of weeds and countless sharp stones. The knife was still lodged in my heart, rolling down with me. It hurt terribly, painfully so. Evan Shaw, standing on the hillside, looked shocked, but there was also a hint of sadness in his eyes. Was he sad because he hadn't killed me the way he wanted to? Or was he sad because I had truly fallen in love with him? I wasn't sure. I kept rolling, not knowing how long I had been rolling, only feeling that my entire body ached as if my bones were shattered. If I were a normal person, with a knife stabbed into my chest and falling from such a height, there would be no chance of survival. Unfortunately, I am not a normal person. So, I wouldn't die either. I rolled to the bottom of the slope. I lay flat on the ground, looking up at the moon. The moon tonight was full, and the surroundings were brightly lit. I reached out and pulled out the knife. Blood gushed out instantly, splattering my face. I gasped for breath, feeling as though I might lose consciousness and die at any moment. The blood flowed more and more, quickly covering the ground around me in a sticky, wet mess. I closed my eyes and tried to steady my breathing. I don't know how much time passed, but when I opened my eyes, the moon was still high in the sky, and the surroundings were still bright. I slowly sat up. My clothes were completely soaked in blood, and I couldn't see any of their original color. I raised my hand again and looked at the spot on my arm where it had been cut. The area had healed completely, except for the bloodstains, with no trace of the wound remaining. I placed my hand over my heart. The heart that had been pierced through just a few hours ago now felt as though nothing had ever happened, except for a hole in my clothes. I stood up from the ground, my limbs aching terribly. Though I didn't die, the pain is real. When the knife pierced my heart, I truly believed I was going to die. However, it turns out a broken heart hurts this much. Under the moonlight, I slowly curled my lips into a smile. The game is over. It's time to claim the fruits of victory. 7:30 p.m. I climbed into Evan Shaw's room using a climbing rope, opened the door from the inside, and saw Evan Shaw celebrating alone. Celebrating his successful hunt. Though it was a bit disappointing, at least he succeeded. So he had to celebrate. But the moment he saw me, the celebration had to stop. In fact, Evan Shaw looked like he'd seen a ghost, and the wine bottle in his hand shattered on the ground. He quickly grabbed the knife on the table and aimed it at me. Are you human or a ghost? Hilarious. Of course I'm human. But I won't die. I turned my neck and pulled out the knife that had been stabbed into my heart just moments ago, still stained with my blood. Want to know why I'm still alive? I smiled innocently and stepped closer to him. Evan Shaw didn't hesitate, raising the knife to stab me. I dodged quickly and delivered a spinning kick, knocking the knife out of his hand. I then delivered a powerful kick to his chest. I've lived this long, and even though I can't die, the pain is real. I had to learn some self-defense skills. They'll come in handy against scum like you. Luna Evans, what kind of monster are you? Evan Shaw looked at me with an expression more terrifying than seeing a ghost. The knife he had personally plunged into my heart was now gone, leaving no trace of injury, which naturally made him feel terrified. I didn't want to waste any more words with him. The clock was ticking closer to midnight. Karma is a circle, what goes around comes around. The suffering he had inflicted on his victims, I would return in kind. As a service to the people. At most, I would demand a small price. Let me kill you once, and I'll owe you nothing. But we must exchange favors. You kill me once, and I'll rip out your heart. I spoke with a smile, then, under his nearly shattered gaze, I reached out, and pulled out that black heart. When Ethan Shaw returned, he saw me sitting in a pool of blood, holding a knife in my hand, smiling at him. Ethan Shaw froze. He rushed to me, embraced me tightly, and said, "Thank goodness you're okay. I've always known what Evan Shaw did, and I knew he made me move here to kill you. But he was my own brother, and I couldn't hand him over. So I decided to move you here first and pretend to hate girls in front of him, making him think I killed you myself. I didn't expect him to find out. Luckily, you're okay." He went on and on. I didn't listen much. I just pushed him away and smiled, asking, "I killed your brother with my own hands. Aren't you angry with me?" Ethan Shaw glanced at Evan Shaw, who was now completely silent. His gaze was heavy. Though a flash of pity crossed his eyes, he shook his head decisively. He has too many lives on his hands. Such a man deserves to die. Before he could finish, the blood-stained knife in my hand sliced through his throat. Blood sprayed all over my face again, the strong smell of blood was unbearable. He clutched his neck, his eyes wide open, trying to ask me why. But he couldn't speak anymore. I grabbed his jacket and slowly wiped the knife clean. You said it yourself. You have too many lives on your hands. Such a person deserves to die. I looked up at him and smiled. Twin brothers working together, covering for each other, and forging each other's alibis to evade all investigations. How clever of you. After saying that, I quickly delivered another blow. This time, I slit open his chest and pulled out his heart, black as ink. 2 black hearts. These were the fruits of my victory in this game. I stood up, looking down at Ethan Shaw, who was about to die. Actually, you were right. The knife is indeed a bone-scraping blade, but it depends on who you encounter. You thought you were eliminating a menace to society, but in reality, you were the one harming society. How evil. That's why these 2 hearts are so terrifyingly black. August 10th. Seattle authorities released a news statement announcing the capture of a serial killer. However, the serial killer was not a single individual but a pair of twins. They had been covering for each other to evade the authorities. Unfortunately, both killers met a gruesome end at home. Their breasts were cut off, their shin bones shattered, and their hearts were removed. On the night of August 7th, they met the same fate and ended their lives. The forums were ablaze with discussions. All the netizens were talking about the case. The murderers have finally been caught. Now we can sleep soundly. Yes, no more worrying about getting killed by a boyfriend. But I'm curious, what kind of person is this Dark Messenger who eliminated the murderers for us? Dark Avenger? What a fitting name. I looked at the online comments and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Dark Avenger. What an odd name. Jason Cole handed me the file folder. We recovered 2 black hearts this time. Happy? I nodded vigorously. Very happy. The women of our family can achieve immortality. As long as we find a ruthless criminal who deeply loves us on the day we turn 18, we must personally remove his black heart and complete the ritual to gain immortality. At 18, I successfully completed the ritual and gained immortality. From then on, as long as I don't fall in love, I won't die. But even though I won't die, all physical injuries will slowly heal. But the pain is real. To gradually fade away this pain, to the point where even being cut by a knife feels no pain, I must continue using black hearts as offerings. When I have enough black hearts, I will no longer feel any pain. So when I learned there was a serial killer in Seattle, I staged a grand confession ceremony with Xiao Zhe, knowing it would attract the killer. At first, I thought the killer was just one of the twins. Because twins have special genes, while I can discern whether a heart is black or not, I cannot distinguish between twins. That's why I started testing them step by step. I never expected both of them to be the sculptor. Xiao Zhe asked me where I wanted to go next. This city is no longer safe. Where should we go next? I didn't know either. Just as I was lost in thought, the TV reported another news story. Santa Monica had arrested over a dozen human traffickers and rescued hundreds of innocent women and children. These traffickers had kidnapped women and children and sold them to remote mountain villages, where they were forced to marry men without sons to carry on their family lines. The traffickers hid their hideouts in the mountains as well, collaborating with an entire village, making it impossible to locate their true hideouts to this day. There are still many women and children awaiting rescue. Looking at the traffickers with their faces blurred out on the news, and the mountain village whose location remains unknown, Xiao Zhe and I exchanged a smile.